Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kirby Anderson.
Lots of topics to address today. We're going to spend our first part of our program today talking about, again, these Planned Parenthood videos. We've learned a lot more about them ever since the Center for Medical Progress has dropped now 5 different collections of videos, more to come as well. So we're certainly going to spend some time talking about that today, as we always do. And for those of you that yesterday were able to visit our website or follow up on the email, I think we had about 800 of you that actually contacted your 2 senators and told them that either you appreciated how they voted or disagreed with that. Now, 800 is a pretty good number, but it's a fraction of a percent of all the listeners, so there's still a great opportunity for you to let your elected representatives know how you feel on the issue. Of course, there's probably going to be a vote in the House of Representatives, but as I've said before, it's important before a vote to let them know how you feel. But sometimes we're not very good at letting them know after their vote how we feel. And for those of you that live in states where your senators voted correctly, a pat on the back might be helpful to them. And those of you that live in states where a senator voted the wrong way, well, you need to let them know as well. So we've made it possible, as you go to our website, pointofview.net, have a section there called Take Action. And the title on it at the moment, 46 Senators Defend Planned Parenthood, which I think is indefensible. And we'll give you a chance to follow up on that as well if you were not one of those hundreds and hundreds of people that did so yesterday. And it's available, and we'll talk more about its significance in just a minute. We bring to the microphone an individual who's been in studio with us before. She joins us now by phone, Marjorie Dannenfelser. She is the organizer and president of the Susan B. Anthony List. It is a national pro-life group which is really dedicated to pursuing policies and, most importantly, electing candidates to ultimately bring an end to abortion. She's helped elect through her organization, the SBA List, more than 100 pro-life candidates around the country. And, of course, those are just the ones in the House of Representatives, 19 to the U.S. Senate, 16 others in various statewide offices. And last time spent almost $15 million as sort of a counterstrike to the so-called war on women. Marjorie, always great to have you on the program with us.
I love being with you. I love it even more in studio because you have a fun time there, but talking to you from D.C. is going to have to do today.
Well, that's fine. You're out there in the middle of all that vote. I want to get into these videos in just a minute, but let's, if we can, since we yesterday did talk about the vote and encourage people to respond. It is amazing to me, and I know we've been in the battle for a long time, but it is amazing to me that you cannot find 60 senators who just say, you know, maybe it's time to defund an organization that, as we've pointed out before, you look at some of the Lila Rose videos in terms of encouraging statutory rape and taking money to actually eliminate more black babies, and now all the selling of body parts. But you could not bring even 60 senators to the table to vote to end filibuster and to invoke cloture. And that still is just amazing to me. What are your thoughts?
It's easy to underestimate 2 things. One is the ability of any of us to truly penetrate the country and the culture with even a video this outrageous. But it's also easy to underestimate how tied these senators have been for many, 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 many years to Planned Parenthood and the funding that they put into their campaigns and the fear that they have, even if they are on the other side of them on the issue. that Planned Parenthood is able to engender in their souls and make them worry about having to move into the private sector and not be in the U.S. Senate anymore. In other words, they fear Planned Parenthood. That's what we want for ourselves. We want to be feared because we want these senators to know that we mean business, right? But the thing to be hopeful about, though, is the fact that even though it's very hard to penetrate, very hard to saturate the culture with these videos, this in particular, this moment is singular. It is very different from when we had this battle in 2011, because immediately, with no penetration really yet much, many governors stood up, senators stood up, committee chairs on the House of Representatives jumped to their feet to say, I will lead on this. That's very different. That has not happened since the founding of Planned Parenthood. The fact that there would be any, I know it's a sad way to spin this, but the fact that there is any leadership is great news. The fact that there is so much of it is even better news, and we're just going to have to work a little harder, and there is no giving up.
Well, and again, I will give credit where credit is due. You had at least 2 Democratic senators from Indiana and West Virginia that voted to end the filibuster, to actually go ahead and vote on this issue of defunding Planned Parenthood. And I recognize that even if you voted to invoke cloture, then that's a procedural vote. I know Susan Collins said, well, I was going to vote to do that, but then when it came time to defund it, I wasn't going to do so. So I think that it was even a small hurdle to overcome, but we have some of that. But it's nevertheless something that we need to work forward and work towards. But you also alluded to something that we talked about the other day with our friends at the Media Research Center, and that is penetration. We found from them that if you looked at Cecil the Lion, in about 2 days, that Cecil the Lion got 30 minutes full of coverage just in a 2-day period, which I think is kind of an interesting news story. So I'm not begrudging the networks for covering Cecil the Lion. But then when you talk about the other Cecils, that is Cecile Richards and Planned Parenthood, over a 2-week period, these videos got like 11 minutes. So it still is a problem because, as you well know, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, having dealt with the mainstream media, most of the news editors and a lot of others are not favorable to a pro-life idea. And even these videos, which in most cases would have been newsworthy, were not seen as very newsworthy by the mainstream media.
That's right. Even so, it did penetrate more than the Gosnell horrors in Pennsylvania, that abortionist who's now in jail from doing illegal late-term abortions. I should leave it to you to come up with it. Cecil and Cecile. I mean, you're the only one so far that I've heard make that connection. Yes, you're good.
We'll make it the connection. You'll use that.
Really
Why don't you
good.
Take it and run with it? I'm not the only one. Kevin Williamson uses it too. Yeah, but it's still a lot of fun.
Every day.
Yeah,
I need to call you every day for my wordsmithing. But no, you're right. In fact, I was in the House that day, House of Representatives that day, and I met with 3 different of the women members that are friends and allies, and they independently brought up that same inverted relationship that should be, that the lion was being lionized, and that the children were getting the cold shoulder. I think a lot of it is, we know the power of social media, and we can address this problem. We are not victims. Very often, we're not complete victims. We're only a tiny bit of victims of the mainstream media. We can, and we're capable of going over the heads of the mainstream media by communicating through social networks. And that is why I believe in many ways politics has changed in the last 15 years. But it is definitely how, when these videos come out and when new news comes out, that is really important. While we have an obligation to not avoid social media as the root of all evil, but to use it to our advantage.
Well, we're going to take a break, and we'll continue our conversation with Marjorie Dannenfelser. And we also welcome your phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. Lots to cover. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Is polygamy the next step in the redefinition of marriage? Julian Keenan writes in Slate that we should legalize polygamy and adds, "No, I'm not kidding." Frederick de Boer writes in Politico that it's time to legalize polygamy, and he adds group marriage is the next horizon of social liberalism. They remind us that many people, from Rick Santorum to Bill O'Reilly to Tony Perkins, have been warning that legalizing same-sex marriage will lead to polygamy and polyamory. The moral and legal argument for polygamy is now very simple. First, acknowledge that a redefinition of marriage does not have to stop at two. Chief Justice John Roberts in the recent same-sex marriage decision pointed out that even though the majority randomly inserts the adjective two in various places, it offers no reason at all why the two-person element of the core definition of marriage may be preserved while the man-woman element may not. Second, the same-sex marriage decision was based in part on the belief that society has shifted in its opinion about marriage, and the same could be true about shifting opinions about plural marriage. After all, why should the sexual revolution stop at same-sex marriage? For that matter, why should it even stop at polygamous marriage? Third, the law should not discriminate against minorities. Already thousands of Muslims in America live in polygamous families. The man marries one woman in a legal ceremony and the other women in a religious ceremony. The case could be made that other women deserve legal protection as well. The current debate about polygamy demonstrates that those who predicted same-sex marriage would lead to polygamous marriage were right. This is what happens when you redefine marriage. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus documentary, now available on DVD and online for digital download. More information at patternsofevidence.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
To join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Privileged to have with us today Marjorie Dannenfelser, and she, of course, is the president of the Susan B. Anthony List, and we're talking about everything from Planned Parenthood to the pro-life issues, and we'll get into a couple of pro-life issues apart just from these videos a little bit later. I'd love to get her comments on some of the candidates, because after all, we'll have our first presidential debate tomorrow night. We'll be covering that in its fullness on Friday, but let's also take some phone calls along the way. If you have a comment or a question about the videos, about the pro-life movement, Planned Parenthood, you are welcome to join us. 1-800-351-1212. Let's head out to Texas first. KBJS. Shirley, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. My comment is simple. I'm wondering how many of our representatives have family members that receive funds from Planned Parenthood. I heard a story of Eric Holder's wife, who's a pediatrician, and actually rents office space to an abortion clinic. And I'm assuming that that clinic probably receives funds from Planned Parenthood. And I just suspect that's why we can't get 60 senators to vote against Planned Parenthood. Family members getting funds. Yep. Anyway, that's it.
Well, and I think there's a good question to be asked sometimes. How many candidates receive money from National Abortion Rights League or Planned Parenthood? It's obviously going to affect how you're going to vote on whether or not to defund Planned Parenthood. Wouldn't you think, Marjorie?
Oh, every single time. And that is why the focus on the presidential election is so appropriate right now, because in a lot of ways, the most probably realistic strategy for getting this passed sooner rather than later is to clear out the bad leadership underbrush that exists in the U.S. Senate and to make sure that we have a president who will sign such a bill. Because, I mean, even think about it, if we had, I mean, God is good and we can all work really hard. If we had gotten to 60 votes on Monday afternoon, we would still have to have 67 votes in order to push back on the president's veto. So 67 votes is a lot of votes to have. It's 2/3 of the U.S. Senate, and it also means that when you have an organization like Planned Parenthood that has still a very high approval rating, given what is going on now, it's going to take a little bit more work. Now, I hope it is really, really fast work. I hope that we could get to 67, 68 votes in the fall. And again, the Holy Spirit is working in this, things that have happened that have never happened before because of the horrific nature of these videos and the reality of those children. But you know what? Even if we stay really focused on the election while we're doing this important citizen advocacy work, it will not be in vain, because any president can undo just about anything if he has the numbers. And so this will be really vitally important to stay really, really focused on this presidential election. If we don't, it's going to be a long time before there can be real permanent change.
Well, and again, another aspect of that, of course, one is defunding Planned Parenthood, but the other one was the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. Same kind of situation. You've got to probably believe that the president indeed would veto that as well. So either you change the presidency, which I think is what you're advocating for, or you have to make sure that you have a somewhat veto overriding type of Senate, and those are both pretty significant challenges, and yet I know you're setting your sights on really both of those, aren't you?
We are. I mean, that is the goal, and it will be to pass defunding of Planned Parenthood without question. Also, however, is the Pain-Capable bill, which has really taken the states by storm. It's just a 20-week ban. It's just a 20-week protection. It is so modest in what it asks from our leaders and from our country in terms of protection. We're one in 7 nations that has failed to protect babies after that point, and we're included with China, North Korea, and Vietnam in among those 7. That's not the club of human rights that we should be in. So there is no question that defunding Planned Parenthood, of course, will take a cash incentive. That cash very well may end up being supplied by somebody else if we get when we get out of the abortion business, you and I. So it still has to be done. You and I cannot be culpable in this act. However, the job is not done. The partner in this is making sure that we are actually specifically addressing the human rights of that boy or girl who is waiting to be born.
Well said.
Not only the surrounding environment, not only his or her surrounding environment, but his or her rights in particular. So both of these bills are vital, and we cannot lose sight of that important beginning Pain-Capable bill in the middle of all of this other horror. In fact, this other horror should feed our motivation to get as many votes as we can.
Again, some very practical things that we can and should do. We've had action items on that, but also we have a link to the Susan B. Anthony list, which is sba-list.org. In case you can't write that down or remember it, we have a link to it. Just click on the picture where Marjorie's face is, and you will find that, as well as some material that we've posted, an article that Lindsey Graham and Marjorie wrote a while back on the issue of late-term abortion. So that will give you an article as well as a link to the website. And let's go back and take another phone call in California, KYCC. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, how you guys doing today?
Very good. What would you like to put on the table?
Well, I joined you a little late, but yeah, this topic's been, pretty hot debate. I just don't understand why, Hillary Clinton, she's running and she's for women's rights, but yet she's taking all this money for, from countries, in the Middle East for her campaign, where women don't have any rights. And the second thing I wanted to say is, a lot of people say this is not spiritual warfare. You look at it, and Christians are being beheaded in the Middle East, and yet you get Unborn here, they're getting, pretty much beheaded in the womb. So kind of goes hand in hand.
Matter of fact, second hour, we're going to be talking about prayer as a spiritual weapon. We'll get into that issue and certainly spiritual warfare, which I think is another aspect of that. But okay, Hillary Clinton is for women's rights, but not women's rights inside the womb, and she's for women's rights, but not women's rights in the Middle East. You don't need to address both of them, but certainly what about this issue? Because, again, if you want a pro-life president, don't think it's going to be Hillary Clinton, do you?
Won't be Hillary Clinton, that's for sure. I thought that was just a profound articulation by you. I don't remember his name now, but the caller who called in,
Chris.
Both of those points were really great. And on the Hillary point, it's only she said when Joni Ernst, that great new senator from Iowa who led the defunding Planned Parenthood fight in the U.S. Senate, she said in reference to Joni Ernst that it's not enough to be a woman. You have to be basically my kind of woman, a woman who's more like me than like Joni Ernst. You got to be fighting for what real rights are, meaning the rights that I decide are convenient for me to endorse. So that certainly extends a blind eye to people who perhaps are completely undermining women, whether in the womb or in the Middle East, but will be politically beneficial to my campaign. That's the kind of rights that, it's such a mumbo-jumbo, illogical thing that it's hard to even follow sometimes. But the reality of Hillary's future political life means, though, that people don't talk about what we're talking about today, that everyone hush up about these videos, everyone hush up about the possibility of stopping abortion after even 20 weeks, and that includes herself. She said one word so far, disturbing, about the videos. I mean, and that was a great hallelujah moment, that's at least she would say that. And on the late term, the pain-capable bill, after 20 weeks, she did criticize Walker for being against women's rights, but that's it. So she really hopes that the war on women now will be defined around pay equity, family leave, those types of issues, because we've gone from defense to offense right now on the abortion issue, which is another hallelujah moment, but we cannot let her or any other Democratic candidate get away from the reality of the contradiction in their women's rights arguments.
You can tell that Planned Parenthood is on defense when your only comments are, well, we don't like the tone of the videos, or they've been highly edited. I mean, if that's your best argument, you are definitely playing defense rather than offense. So that's a good point. We need to take another one of those breaks. We come back. I think one of our other callers wants to talk about the importance of prayer. And I might just mention, we got David Ireland with us in the second hour, prayer as a weapon, and talk about that in a way that maybe you've not heard before. But again, if indeed we believe that this is spiritual warfare, that's an important issue. It also is, of course, political, cultural, and spiritual. So there are all sorts of aspects of this, and so we wanted you to know more about the Susan B. Anthony list, and of course you can find out more about Marjorie Dannenfelser, all of that at our website, pointofview.net. Let's take a break. We'll come back, and we'll take some more phone calls, and then talk about some of these videos, all that coming up right after this.
From Thinking Man Films, Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus on DVD. Earlier this year, thousands gathered in theaters nationwide for a one-night event, the release of a new documentary, Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus. The Exodus presents new scientific evidence clearly matching the biblical account. A documentary now available on DVD, featuring narration by actor Kevin Sorbo and interviews with leading archaeologists. Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, the DVD, soundtrack, and book, and available online for digital download. More information at patternsofevidence.com. And never give up on defending life. Urge your elected representatives to defund Planned Parenthood. Please, the recent revelations have the political fire on high. Visit pointofview.net and click on the Take Action link to defund Planned Parenthood. We should not have to participate in this grisly evil. Come on, we make it easy for you to speak up with just a few clicks. Pointofview.net, take action. Pointofview.net, take action. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kirby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Marjorie Dannenfelser. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Susan B. Anthony List, and you can find out more by visiting our website or simply going to their website as well. Let's take another phone call before we get back into some of the topics on the table. Certainly want to talk about some of those Center for Medical Progress videos, what we've learned from that, and also, of course, the funding and defunding of Planned Parenthood. Let's go out to Ohio first. Carrie, thank you for joining us today.
Hi. I just came off of 2 weeks of church camp earlier in June, and I really believe that the greatest weapon we have is prayer. We really learned a lot about it's God's place to judge, Jesus' place to love, and the Holy Spirit's place to convict. And where two or more are gathered, there he is in the midst. And through prayer, and strong prayer through churches and youth groups and just people you love and know are believers, God knows what's going on. None of this is a surprise to him.
Well,
he knows how this will go, and he will convict people of their sins and wrongdoings, as he does for me.
Well, again, we have had our Pray for America campaign, and I hope you can be with us the second hour because we'll have David Ireland with us as we talk about prayer as a weapon, and that is going to be...
And it definitely is. I mean, and I know I'm going to talk real fast. When you're in the midst of 250 youth and you're praying, there is no doubt that Jesus is there in the midst, and the Holy Spirit is in there, convicting people of what's right and what's wrong. And that's how we're going to win this battle, because these are horrible, horrible things, and it sickens me when I hear about it on the news and I see these things. But God covers us with his grace, and that's how this is going to be fixed, is through prayer and asking God to come into us and convict people of this. Let the Holy Spirit work in their souls. And you guys got a great station, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for sharing that, and you've set us up for the second hour when we have David Ireland as we talk about his book, The Weapon of Prayer. But let's, if we can, for just a minute, Marjorie, also maybe give people some equipping ideas, because as they talk about this idea of defunding Planned Parenthood, I know one that came up is, well, look at all the good that they do. And of course, I always like to say, okay, tell me what that is. But we have these federally qualified health centers. We have 13 times as many people going to, well, actually, as 13 times as many centers as we have abortion clinics. We have 10 times as many people going to them as Planned Parenthood. So let's take the money that we did give to Planned Parenthood, $528 million, I might add, and put them in clinics that already exist that don't do abortion. That seems like a good idea to me.
That's exactly right. And it depends upon lack of scrutiny for Planned Parenthood to get away with that kind of lie, and for Cecile Richards and all the other apologists and the candidates and the sitting officials who want to keep repeating the lie that without Planned Parenthood, women's health cannot be served. Even Jeb Bush got pinged for saying we didn't need money for what he meant to say was Planned Parenthood, but because Planned Parenthood has become synonymous in their own minds with health, with women's health, and they've done that. Even in Jeb Bush's misstep, he used the word women's health instead of Planned Parenthood. That shows the degree to which Planned Parenthood has done a pretty darn good job of convincing people that they're the only ones who care about the health of women. Well, anyone who has looked at their record of health, healthy and clean standards, and in their clinics, and anybody who has paid attention to how they have facilitated human trafficking of young girls through their clinics, anyone who is paying attention to how they treat a 20-year-old twin baby that's at 20 weeks, anybody who has seen any of that knows these are not the pro-woman advocates they purport to be. There's only one Planned Parenthood for every 13, as you just said, community health centers in the country. And at those community health centers, the hierarchy of values actually makes a lot of sense. It's that the woman who walks in may have many issues that she is trying to deal with. She may be a diabetic. She may be concerned that she might have cancer. So all the claims that Planned Parenthood makes about it helping with cancer treatments and detection, they don't do those at their clinics. They send them out they send out patients to get mammograms at other places. There is so much deception. It is so thick. The good news is, combined with the previous caller's cry out for us to be praying, the Holy Spirit and the light of day shine on the activities of Planned Parenthood, and the abortion industry in general is doing many good things to the consciences of our nation. Those consciences once stirred in our elected officials have to incite action. They have to incite action to vote against the number one provider of abortions in this country. Not only this country, but among the top 4 in the world are they, meaning countries. Compared to countries, they are one of 4 top providers of abortions. It's also really important to understand that when they talk about pregnancy care, they mean really abortion. 94% of pregnancy care at Planned Parenthood is abortion. The rest are the few whose babies do come to term, or the few that adopt.
I have sometimes, Marjorie, people, just the few facts you just of abortion, parent to other nations, and even when they do talk about pregnancy care, how much of it has to do with abortion. You just don't hear that too many other places. And I think if more people knew that, including some members of Congress, who I'm appalled at how really ignorant they are about some of these issues. We read on the air the other day a letter from one senator who, by the way, voted not to defund Planned Parenthood, who was giving some of those arguments about, well, there are all these health services they're providing and all these kinds of things. And if you ever ask anybody on the street, or even as I've done on the program here, does Planned Parenthood provide mammograms? They all say yes. I go, no, they don't. And they just are. If we could get more information out, I think more people would just really begin to wonder whether or not it's worth $528 million of our tax dollars.
Yes, that's true. That is really true. It's the getting of the information out, and it's often, as you just noted, getting the information into the hands of decision makers. And that is the only reason why Susan B. Anthony List and I would focus on elections, because when you get the accurate information about abortions in this country or Planned Parenthoods in this country, when you get the accurate information in the hands of a beautiful senator like Joni Ernst, or a great champion like Senator Langford, or on and on and on, then you have a podium that where someone is standing that can reach far more people on an exponential level, certainly with the information, but then also, of course, the laws. But we should all, if we care at all about this, you're absolutely right, arming ourselves with the actual information so that we're prepared for a conversation. We don't have to get all worried or anxious about what we're going to say, because we already know. The facts themselves are enough to defund Planned Parenthood and to stop abortion at least after 20 weeks. We should have every baby saved. But how about just at 20 weeks? That would save 18,000 girls and boys per year. 18,000, easy. With the stroke of the pen, a president could do it in a second. That's a small town. That's all these people that were sent to the world for a purpose that we don't have, and we would have back. We would start to have them back. It's just that big.
Let's take another phone call. We'll head out to Georgia this time on the Good News Network. Chris, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, yes, not negating anything biblical about abortion or anything along those lines. I was just curious as to why nobody has brought up the fact that all of these ladies who had abortions did it on the basis of the law, that there's no profit in it. There's some money out there. I would assume that somebody's going to sue.
Yeah, what about a lawsuit against Planned Parenthood? Any comments about that, Marjorie?
This is a subject of constant scrutiny among attorneys that we know. Certainly class action lawsuits where women are harmed and are an important tool that we have to use. Of course, there should be lawsuits. I think what we're going to see in these one of the products of these Planned Parenthood videos are going to be some legal scrutiny on what each of these Planned Parenthood is doing, and they are actually violating the law and the way they are manipulating these abortions so that they can get intact babies to dissect.
We'll take a break, and we'll come back with more right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Two questions for you. Do you know how your senators voted on this issue to defund Planned Parenthood? Second question, have you told them what you think about their vote? I would certainly hope that many of you would consider doing so. And for our listeners, for example, in Iowa, we've been talking about Joni Ernst a couple of times. I mean, I know she would greatly appreciate you sending an email. And of course, for those of you in various states, I recognize that some of you in California shake your head, or those of you in New York shake your head at what your senators have done. And I think they still need to hear from you. But many of you will live in states where senators voted the right way, and they need to hear from you as well. So we certainly encourage you to visit the website pointofview.net and to hit that take action button and to see what you can do. And at the same time, I would encourage you to find out a little bit more about Marjorie Dannenfelser as well as the Susan B. Anthony list. We have a link there, or you can just simply go to sba-list, sba.list and .org, and that will give you the information that you will need to know. Just before we take any more phone calls, matter of fact, we might not have any time for any others, these videos are more and more disturbing. About every week or so, they drop another one. The latest one, it's comparing these dead babies and these pieces of babies and these then, quote, intact babies to a line item on an accounting sheet. You have to be pretty crass and have to be pretty far from any kind of sense of humanity to see these videos and to see these people laughing about, well, I got all these parts jumbled together. I mean, I can't even watch some of those. And Marjorie, I'd love to get your comments about the latest set of videos that have dropped just in the last couple of days.
I think the last one, where there was a lot of discussion between the clinicians and the potential buyers of baby parts about intact babies and what it took to get an intact baby for dissection and how late term that baby would be for an appropriate dissection that would get these buyers the parts that they wanted, to me was one of the most disturbing of all. And the detachment, the callousness that has to develop over, if that's your job, was so obvious. And yes, is very lighthearted about going to the freezer to find the 20-week-old twin so that they could take him out of the bag and show the various parts that were so beautifully well developed. Just, not that morning, were beautifully well developed, forming in his mother's womb. I don't know where the other twin is, but I think about this particular twin who didn't give his own parts. They were given by somebody else, and that we are a better nation than this. And the promises of our Constitution and our founders, the promises that we make each other when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, they should take us to a place where we can say we are just better than this. We can stop this. We can stop late-term abortion. We can stop all abortion, but we can at least stop late-term abortion that even makes this possible. And we can certainly shut this organization down whose hearts are so calloused over. They need something other than what they are doing. They need to be liberated from what they're doing in a very Christian way. And it happens over and over again with Planned Parenthood clinicians. So we have a moment here to seize. And it means that we think smart. We need to be thinking, how do I help get this information out that is so vital? Who do I need to get in touch with? We need to get in touch with our senators, and we need to be extremely focused on this next presidential election and thinking ahead and saying, how much of my time will I put into electing a pro-life president so that twin and all of the children that are born after will be honored by us, even the ones that die. We are not powerless. Every other human rights situation in our country has been addressed by people who said no more. And there was a moment, and this can definitely be that moment. In a very short period of time, we can save a lot of children from death.
Let's, if we can, for just a minute, talk about what you do at Susan B. Anthony. The biggest complaint I hear from some of my listeners is everybody talks a good talk, but whether they're really that committed. And, everybody on the Republican side usually claims to be pro-life. You have a few pro-life Democrats, but we'll talk Republican for a minute, because that's where a lot of people are saying, okay, if I'm looking for a pro-life candidate, it's probably going to be a Republican. But some people talk the talk and others walk the walk. And what have you been able to discern first with the presidential candidates, and is there a way that people can maybe connect up with you later to find out how their senators and their members of Congress and others are really on the issue of life? Because everybody claims to be pro-life, but we find out when the votes come, not always the case.
Yeah, I mean, it really does take a little bit more discernment than we usually do, which is to listen and say, fine, you're great. And even sometimes knowing what their vote is won't necessarily tell you how committed and good they are. What we really want, of course, is somebody whose actions match their words. And voting at this moment is not enough. So calling us and finding out how a official that you care about has voted is always an easy matter. That can be done. I think really getting involved in the presidential process and really paying attention will show you two things. One is who speaks well, and second, who has acted well, who has put their actions behind their words. And I would actually add a PS, or a number 3, which is strategically, how will I get involved to maximize the possibility now even that one of these really good candidates is going to win. No matter where you live, you can do something to amplify, to press forward on any of these candidates. And yet, one thing that is really easy to forget is that all of these people, just like us, are human beings subject to pressure. And the only reason that I would ever have picked the electoral process to get into is because I know the consequence of electing a really strong champion. And a really strong champion needs praise when they do well, and they need punishment and correction when they don't do well. And in the politics of our age, that means boots on the ground and cash into their campaigns and our prayers. So that I would just suggest anybody interested should call our office and ask how they can get involved, and there'll be some easy answers.
I might just again mention that your website, sba-list.org. Again, if you can't find that, we have a link to it as well. There's a Susan B. Anthony blog. I think the latest one there was about you being on Janet Partial. And, of course, maybe you'll mention being on this program today, as well as all sorts of pro-life leaders, newsroom, some other ways in which you can find out about legislation and donation. Because, again, as I pointed out before, you were able to spend more than $15 million to really counterstrike and argue against the so-called war on women that was in the last campaign. And certainly this issue of Planned Parenthood will be a big issue. I suspect to hear a lot of talk about it tomorrow night at the presidential debate. So, as always, Margie, great to have you on the program. Let's do it again soon.
Thank you so much. I'll be there tomorrow night, so maybe I'll see some of your folks out there.
Well, I hope you'll call in and tell us what you think after that. And of course, we're going to be having a conversation on Friday, so we might even be able to facilitate that. So let's see what we can do. But we need to take a break, so let's take the time here to set up for the next hour. As I mentioned, David Ireland's going to be with us. We're going to be talking about his book, The Weapon of Prayer. And Carrie from Ohio kind of started the conversation in that direction. And so we are going to actually spend some time talking about that. And of course, we have our Pray for America brochures. If you haven't already signed up for that, that is one of the things we encourage you to do, to be praying for America, because in light of all the things that we are hearing every single day, that Pray for America button is certainly one that you need to be involved with as well. Lots of great resources on our website today, as we've already talked about. So go to pointofview.net and get those resources and be an effective ambassador and also an activist to make a difference in your community. We'll come back with more about prayer right after this.
From Thinking Man Films, Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus on DVD. Earlier this year, thousands gathered in theaters nationwide for a one-night event, the release of a new documentary, Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus. The Exodus presents new scientific evidence clearly matching the biblical account. A documentary now available on DVD, featuring narration by actor Kevin Sorbo and interviews with leading archaeologists. Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, the DVD, soundtrack, and book, and available online for digital download. More information at patternsofevidence.com. And never give up on defending life. Urge your elected representatives to defund Planned Parenthood. Please, the recent revelations have the political fire on high. Visit pointofview.net and click on the Take Action link to defund Planned Parenthood. We should not have to participate in this grisly evil. Come on, we make it easy for you to speak up with just a few clicks. Pointofview.net, take action. Pointofview.net, take action. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track, and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I'm constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kirby Anderson.
Second hour, we're going to talk about the subject of prayer, and this is something we've dealt with before in our Pray for America campaign. This new book, The Weapon of Prayer, Maximize Your Greatest Strategy Against the Enemy. And even in the first hour here, we had Carrie call in and talk about the need to pray for Planned Parenthood and pray for conviction of those individuals. Just a perfect setup for what we're going to be talking about now with Dr. David Ireland. You perhaps are familiar with some of his books, but if not, he is the lead pastor there at Christ Church, which is in northern New Jersey. Multi-site place and congregation, 8,000 different individuals that are part of that church, representing almost 60 different nationalities. And he has served as the diversity consultant for the National Basketball Association, led chapel services for the New York Giants and New York Jets, written over 20 different books, has a degree in civil engineering, a master's degree in theology, as well as his doctoral degree in organizational leadership from Regent University, as well as having completed postdoctoral work at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. David Ireland, thank you so very much for joining us today here on Point of View.
Oh, my pleasure, Kirby. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, great to have you on the program. And when we talk about the weapon of prayer, for some of our listeners, they go, great, because prayer is a weapon. Others are going, I don't know, weapon? I don't think about that. And you open with a story about getting rear-ended by a hearse, which I thought was pretty funny. And then you got a great sense of humor. You said, oh, is that how you get new clients? You know, but nevertheless, you were struck by the fact that he was using the hearse to run errands. But if you think about it, in a funeral home, I guess you have to do so. And you use that as an illustration that sometimes when you talk about something like prayer as a weapon, we don't have a category for that to fit in sometimes, do we?
I know. It sounds almost like an oxymoron, and it really is not, because when you think about the weapon, a weapon is something that you use to overpower, to outwit, or overcome an opponent. And we're in this spiritual war, and you can simply see that even when your earlier guest, Marjorie, talked about the whole idea of Planned Parenthood. We're in a war here. It's not just a war on ethics. There's spiritual things, spiritual forces going on that's driving people to hold to certain philosophical views that's so antithetical to real living and fulfilled living. So Jesus used prayer as a weapon. It wasn't an isolated thing. It's not my own concoction, so to speak. Anything that is fighting against God's purposes, you must look at that as something that's adversarial. And the way we outwit or overpower, overcome an opponent is through the use of weapon. And so when he prayed, Jesus used that as an example. When Satan said he desired to sift Peter like wheat, in Luke 22, Jesus' response was, I have prayed for you, Satan. Or I've prayed for you, Peter, rather. I've prayed for you, Peter, that your faith doesn't fail. Mm-hmm. And so that means that Jesus was overpowering Satan's intent and desire to annihilate Peter's faith. He was overpowering it through the use of prayer. And so we can conclude there and other places that prayer is indeed a weapon.
Talking with David Ireland in his new book, The Weapon of Prayer, which we commend to you. We have information about it on the website. You might be able to find it in your local bookstore, but if not, we give you a place where you can order it. And, of course, we also have a link to his website, which I think you're going to find very helpful, because lots of great resources that you can find right there at davidireland.org. If you don't have a chance to write that down, it's on the website, and I would encourage you to go there for some more information. Let's talk about those people that aren't involved in prayer. You talk about the high indifference virus, an HIV virus, if you will, and you have 4 symptoms: disinterest in the fight, disbelief in the fight, discouraged by the fight, and disdain for the fight. The second one seems to be key. When I wrote my book on spiritual warfare, I talked about the fact that a lot of people are engaged in warfare, but they don't even know there's a spiritual battle taking place. You can't win a battle when you don't even know you're in the midst of one.
Absolutely, you're correct. In fact, when you think of what Paul told the Corinthian church, he says in 2 Corinthians 10, verse 3 and 4, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds." And most people, I use this acronym HIV, or high indifference virus, to talk about the apathy that's there not only in the Christian church, but just throughout the world. People are just getting so neutral in regards to spiritual warfare. I gave this example. On Tuesday of last year, June 25th, this young mother was attacked and viciously beaten in front of her. The attacker was a coworker, another female that was larger than Catherine Ferrara. She broke her nose, punched her and kicked her, giving her a concussion, 2 black eyes, numerous cuts and bruises. And the shocking crime here is not just the beating, was the fact that these 12 adults were videotaping it. And within 54 seconds, this beating that took place, it was uploaded to all of their social media accounts. And, Kirby, the only person that jumped in to rescue Catherine from this vicious beating was her 2-year-old son, Xavier Ortiz.
Yes.
Somehow this little pint-sized warrior knew that it was wrong what was being done to his mother. And even though he tried to do something about it by hitting, by kicking, by punching, the attacker, his little feet couldn't do any harm, but he knew it was wrong to sit on the sidelines. It was wrong to sit there disconnected, or what I call have a high indifference virus in regards to this fight. And so in the same breath, I use that as an illustration to say, criminally wrong spiritually for us to have an apathetic view or not to be engaged in a spiritual battle. Jesus was engaged, Paul was engaged, and the Bible calls us to get engaged. And if we're not engaged, it's not a response that we're strong, it's a reflection that we're weak, and something has to be done. And so I really then help the reader. I take a step back and I shepherd the reader through this. I'm not beating up the reader because no one wants to buy a book or get a book that just beats them up. I mean, they just every time they turn the page, there's another black eye that comes at them. But the book, I take the perspective of let me hold your hand and coach you in the areas of prayer and recognize how prayer works, what you must do, how you can engage God in this most powerful gift that He's given us, that we have the opportunity to approach God at any time, anywhere, and ask our request of Him. And why not do that? And so that's what the weapon of prayer is all about.
And again, I think maybe when we come back from the break, I'd like to maybe have you talk about this idea of people becoming discouraged and maybe even having disdain for the fight. But then I want to get into the idea of lifting up a war cry, because you talk about this in fighting. Then both a defensive kind of prayer as well as an offensive kind of prayer. There's just a lot of great material in this book. And if you are just joining us, we're talking with Dr. David Ireland, and his book is entitled The Weapon of Prayer, Maximize Your Greatest Strategy Against the Enemy. And we have information about him, information about the book, and much more that we always like to talk about in terms of prayer, as well as a nice little book trailer, which I would encourage you to watch, and then maybe hit that share button and put it on your Facebook page or on a blog, or maybe you have a Twitter account or something like that, and that will encourage others to begin to think about prayer in a little different way. Might even cause them to go and get a copy of the book. So we got lots of resources available to you on the website, pointofview.net. Take advantage of those, and we'll take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Dr. David Ireland, get into a few more aspects of his book, and then this last half hour open up for any comments you might have about the issues of the day. Got a lot more to cover. We'll do that right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Is polygamy the next step in the redefinition of marriage? Julian Keenan writes in Slate that we should legalize polygamy and adds, "No, I'm not kidding." Frederick de Boer writes in Politico that it's time to legalize polygamy, and he adds group marriage is the next horizon of social liberalism. They remind us that many people, from Rex Santorum to Bill O'Reilly to Tony Perkins, have been warning that legalizing same-sex marriage will lead to polygamy and polyamory. The moral and legal argument for polygamy is now very simple. First, acknowledge that a redefinition of marriage does not have to stop at two. Chief Justice John Roberts in the recent same-sex marriage decision pointed out that even though the majority randomly inserts the adjective two in various places, it offers no reason at all why the two-person element of the core definition of marriage may be preserved while the man-woman element may not. Second, the same-sex marriage decision was based in part on the belief that society has shifted in its opinion about marriage, and the same could be true about shifting opinions about plural marriage. After all, why should the sexual revolution stop at same-sex marriage? For that matter, why should it even stop at polygamous marriage? Third, the law should not discriminate against minorities. Already thousands of Muslims in America live in polygamous families. The man marries one woman in a legal ceremony and the other women in a religious ceremony. The case could be made that other women deserve legal protection as well. The current debate about polygamy demonstrates that those who predicted same-sex marriage would lead to polygamous marriage were right. This is what happens when you redefine marriage. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus documentary, now available on DVD and online for digital download. More information at patternsofevidence.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
It's our privilege to have with us today Dr. David Ireland as we talk about his book, The Weapon of Prayer. He'll be with us a little bit longer, and it chapters that deal with such things as a powerful weapon, God is our general, lift up a war cry, be strategic in your prayer. Prayer is defense, prayer is offense. What's your rank soldier, the mountain of the Lord. So many great pieces in this book, and we do commend it to you. If you'd like to know a little bit more, we have information about it on our website, pointofview.net. David, let's, if we can, maybe for just a minute, talk about people that might be discouraged. Prayer is hard work. Prayer demands perseverance. What would you share with our listeners in that regard?
I think that discouragement is one of Satan's most effective weapons. If he can get us discouraged and try to disconnect us from our relationship with God, then we're in fact powerless to see change and even provide help that we need for our families and our careers, our lives, and even the broader society. And so the response then is to ask God to lift and to peel away the discouragement from our hearts so that we can be able to have this kind of vibrant spiritual relationship which becomes the foundation to prayer and connecting with God. Prayer is not only just asking God things, prayer is also just a way for us to connect with God. So I would say to someone who's discouraged, start from there. God understands that discouragement can annihilate us, so to speak. And so we need to then be as authentic and as forthright and say, God, I'm discouraged. I don't feel that sense of joy as I used to. Would you help me, show me, point out what I must do in order to be able to overcome this particular emotional hole that I'm in? And God, who loves us, will help us. And so we must recognize that.
Well, again, one of the things that I think might help us is to recognize how powerful a weapon prayer is. And in that chapter, you talk about the fact that prayer gives us authority. It demonstrates our faith. In so many ways, prayer is a very powerful weapon. And a lot of us are carrying around a weapon that we don't know how to use, or very infrequently do we use it.
And you're absolutely correct. And that's the very thing. If we're if we're fighting against discouragement, use prayer then as weapon. When I referred earlier, Kirby, to what Jesus said in Luke 22, he said to Simon Peter, he says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked permission to sift you as wheat, or to shake up your life so that the essentials of who you are falls away. And then Jesus responded by saying, I have prayed for you. And what he was saying with that is that I have brought you, Simon, and your problems that you're about to face into the very presence of God. In prayer, I've surveyed your needs. In prayer, I've discovered a strategy to thwart the enemy's plans. In prayer, I've unearthed the antidote that you need. And then he said, when you return, strengthen your brethren, strengthen your brothers. In other words, I know that prayer works. I have surveyed your problems there, and that's what I'm trying to get people to do, to realize that in prayer you can ask God for wisdom and insight, give you tactical strategy to overcome different things that you're facing. So we're carrying around, like you said, this awesome weapon that we don't even know we're carrying around, and rather than living a defeated life, let's live the victorious life that God wants us to live. Jesus came that we may have life, and life to the full, or life more abundantly. That victorious life can be achieved through a life of prayer.
Very good. You know, one of the more familiar passages in Scripture for most of us is ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. But you have a section here talking about in your book, ask and seek and knock. And it seems to me, again, that that's another important principle in terms of really beginning to tap into the power of prayer, isn't it?
Absolutely. That phrase goes into stages. When you unpack it, when you unearth the full essence of it, we find that asking, sometimes we ask, and that's why some people get discouraged. They ask God for something, very quick request, and they don't get the answer, so they give up. Jesus said that we ought always to pray and never give up. We should move then, not just simply to quitting, but moving to the next level, which is to seek. And seek is about a pursuit. When my children were small, and they're adults now, we used to play hide and seek, and so I would always love that, and sometimes when I'm tired, I didn't feel like playing, and so I would hide in the closet. And when I would hide in the coat closet with these long winter coats, I would go behind the winter coats and put boots in front of my feet so my kids couldn't see me. And so my little girls would look in the closet, wouldn't see anyone because I was blocked by the coats and the boot. But when I shook the coats a little bit, and at some point, and they realized I was back there, and they moved the coats out of the way, and we laughed, and we joked, we rolled on the floor, and we hugged one another because when they found me, they were so excited. We must realize that relationship with God is deepened when we pursue Him. And in prayer sometimes, Kirby, when we're seeking God, we're asking God something repeatedly, different ways, by breaking up, so to speak, the need into bite-sized pieces and asking God to give us clarity and insight. What it does, it deepens the relationship between us and God. And that's what God's looking for. He's looking for this close-knit, knitted, strong, powerful, healthy, passionate relationship. But we should be not just seeking God for things, we should be seeking God for relationship. And in seeking also comes another level. We talk about ask, seek, you'll find. Then Jesus says, knock and the door will be open to you. That speaks of a bit of more forcefulness. And knocking, when you look at it from a prayer perspective, it includes fasting. It includes, at times, having a concentrated, protracted time of prayer. So it requires setting aside specific times. You find Jesus went to the mountainside and prayed all night, sometimes praying for several hours like he did in the Garden of Gethsemane, 3 one-hour blocks of time as he was praying. And so I want the reader to realize that prayer, there's a lot of strategy involved here, but we can't quit because we went to the first ingredient of asking and not understanding there's a seeking phase, there's also a knocking phase, not on everything, but on some things.
Yes, and I might just mention you have a whole section there on strategy. And I might commend this book to our listeners who maybe are pastors or Bible teachers and others, because in this last few minutes, I want to maybe talk about prayer as defense and offense. But you have a whole section here on Epaphras, for example. Develop a whole section here just from Colossians 4 about defensive prayer and then offensive prayer. How could pastors use this? Because it seems to me that this would be very helpful for any individual in terms of improving their prayer life, but I would hope that some people might emulate what you've done. Maybe there are various sermons that they can obtain from you and begin to teach this within the church.
Well, if they go to my website, David Ireland, spelled like the country, .org, they'll be able to get in touch with me, and we've used a 40-day journey manual that I've put together that helps congregations walk people through the elements of prayer over this 6-week period. And I've used it. We just came off that 40-day in our own church and used the book, The Weapon of Prayer, as a basis. And so everyone was in the same headspace, and we all walked through these principles together. But when we look at Colossians 4, Paul tells us to devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. And watchfulness speaks of being observant, looking around, being mindful, being sensitive, being alert, which is a defensive posture. He's saying, look, be on your guard. And when we think about Epaphras, as I referenced in Colossians 4, this guy was really a person that was what I call a kneeling warrior. He understood the benefits and the watchfulness needed in prayer because he was always wrestling in prayer for those at Laodicea, Hierapolis, and also at Colossae. And he wrestled, he was praying for them that they may stay strong, stay firm, stay anchored in the will of God. And this is what pastors must do for their congregations, and this is what everyone must do towards their family, because I feel sorry for the family that doesn't have someone who's alert and watchful in prayer concerning the children or concerning the health of the marriage or concerning the health of the singleness or even just a career issue or just the community, driving on your street to go home or taking the subway to go home or however one gets to and from work or their place of business. If there's not this sense of prayerfulness for that community, then that community stays vacant and stays unprotected. So there has to be this sense of vigilance spiritually, not just in terms of armed forces in the natural, but we must have this sense of vigilance in the spiritual, because if not, we're told our enemy, Satan, walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And I know lion's a big deal right now in the media.
Yes.
No pun intended, but the idea is that I just want to get people strong spiritually so they can have strong families and for us to have a strong nation. That's why I recommend The Weapon of Prayer, and people can also pick that up at Amazon.com or wherever books are sold.
Well, certainly. And again, we have a link to Dr. David Ireland. It's davidireland.org. You can also find out about his availability if you'd like to have him come and speak. Of course, he's talking about some of the other resources available from his church. And again, you can find this book perhaps in your local bookstore, but if not, we have links so that you can find out more about it. The Weapon of Prayer, Maximize Your Greatest Strategy Against the Enemy. And Dr. David Ireland, it's been a delight to have you on the program. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Kirby. Thanks a lot.
We're going to take a break. When we come back on Open Line in this last half hour, perhaps you have some comments about prayer. Perhaps you have some other issues you want to put on the table. I certainly have some. There have been a lot of things in the news that we do need to cover from a Christian perspective, and we will do so. But let's open up the phones and give you this last half hour as well so that you can make some comments about some of the things we've talked about. And certainly we have a look ahead to the presidential debate tomorrow. So all of that on the table. 1-800-351-1212. We'll come back. I'll have some things to say, and then I'll take your phone calls right after this.
How long have you been listening to Point of View? If this is your first day or two, you get a pass. This one isn't for you. But if you've been around a while, I have a question. Have you ever donated to support what we do? If not, why not? Maybe you really don't know. You never seriously thought about it. Well, please think about it. In fact, take action. Do it now. If you keep coming back, you obviously get something from the program. You've heard how people's lives have been transformed and energized to make a difference. And the only way that we can be here tomorrow and next month and next year is if you break that cycle and give. Please, you can likely do more, but act today and give at least $5. $5. Sure, if you can do 50, do it. If you can do 100, do that. But at least 5. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kirby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's take some of your phone calls, and then we're going to get into a couple of issues. Head out to New Mexico first. Paul, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hey, Kirby, thanks for taking the call. All this abortion business and watching the videos last night just tore my heart out. I've got 2 grandkids, both of them 5 years old, a boy and a girl. And I'll tell you what, if I even showed them that video and watch them pick that little arm up with those little fingers and listen to the questions and see the tears, I know they would. I'm having an issue with my granddaughter right now about snails eating my garden, and I want to get rid of them, and she's making me relocate them. And I can just see the heart of children, and I just go back to what Christ said, that we're supposed to be like little children. And I think, what would all of our children in this nation be saying? And here we are as adults saying, just if I don't know about it, it's okay. And I just feel so strongly, and even in the last segment about prayer and how the little boy went in to protect his mother, he knows, and the adults didn't. And we've just got in this nation to become like little children again.
I know. And that story was something that just made me think about this. We're seeing these videos sometimes on YouTube, and I'm always thinking, well, if I were there, you wouldn't see a video because I would get involved. I mean, I would think, at least I hope I would, or I'm calling 911 if somebody's brandishing a gun and I don't have an ability to defend myself. But I would do something other than just stand there holding a video camera. And so that says a lot about our culture. But the broader issue is what you're talking about, the coarseness and callousness that this creates. And I mentioned that just the other day, that we really do have a coarsening about this, and I use that when I talked about this issue of abortion, because we've always said, and I've said this many times before, that abortion has 2 impacts. First of all, it's the impact that it obviously has on the baby, but also the impact that it has on the society. And we have a society today that has just really become so coarse because we've seen so many violent episodes on television, so many movies, and of course we live in a culture where more than 1 million babies are aborted every single year. And I think you're right. We need to come back and see the world through a child's eyes and realize what we have done to ourselves.
Definitely. There's a reason he told us to do that, and this is part of it.
Well, I appreciate you starting us off. Thank you for joining the conversation today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kirby.
I see a number of you want to talk about prayer, and that is something we did in the first half of this hour, and that was with David Ireland, the book of The Weapon of Prayer. So let's get a few of the comments that some of you want to make about prayer. So we'll go first to Texas KJRT. Ron, you've joined the program. What would you like to add?
Yes, Kirby. I don't really think it was good what Mr. Ireland brought out about strategies and, intercession. We hear this term strategic intercession going around this church now, and I think it's important to give examples of that in Chronicles with Jehoshaphat and the armies coming against them, and like the other previous caller said about our babies, our heart breaks because, and it's nothing new because, they sacrificed to the god Molech, centuries ago, and sacrificed their children, and we've done that. And I just believe that if the church has got to come together and hopefully we can strategize and have pouring out of our hearts to God, and that God give us the strategies we need. And in this company, that has done these videos, that may be one of the strategies that God developed. You're always bringing stuff to light because nothing can be hidden. So we know that God's maybe answering prayer through this. And that's my comment. Is anything that I'd just like to hang up and see what you've got to say about it.
Well, I think you've said quite a bit, so I just keep letting you preach, and I'll pass the offering plate because it's a really good material. And again, I think that we have benefited quite a bit by some of these videos that have come out from the Center for Medical Services. And as I said, we have 5 that have launched and dropped, and there are more to come. So we'll certainly see how that unfolds. And of course, we also saw that it at least stimulated a desire to defund Planned Parenthood. It didn't happen this time, but I think it might in the future. As more of these drop and as more people speak out, I believe right now that if everybody listening to this broadcast were to contact their senators, even if you didn't contact them before, now contact them afterwards and say, I appreciate your vote or I disagree with your vote, they're going to pay a lot more attention. And so, as I mentioned at the start of the program, I think the last count I had is about 800 people who went through our website to contact their senators. Of course, some others might have done it independently, and that's good, but that's just a fraction of a percent of the listening audience. Just imagine if they were not just getting a few hundred, but maybe a few thousand comments and emails. I think some of these senators would say, this is not a hill worth dying on. There are a lot of people that are really upset about spending $528 million on Planned Parenthood. I think I'm going to change my vote. This is just not something that's going to be a positive campaign issue, and I have to run for re-election, and I'm going to change my mind. But back to the point that Ron was making, we do need a revival in this country. We need more than a revival. We need a reformation. We not only need a change of our heart, but we need to fill our heads with a Christian worldview. My fear is that if we had a revival right now, some people are so biblically illiterate and so unaware of what a Christian worldview might be that we'd have people in stadiums holding up their hands and praising the Lord, and we'd have churches full, but we'd also have people not really thinking biblically about every area of life. So I hope that we can be something in that regard as well here at Point of View. But let's take some more phone calls, because certainly some of you have wanted to make some comments about this issue of prayer. So we'll head up to Illinois this time, listening online. Lewis, thank you for joining us today.
Okay. I'd like to say something about this abortion issue. I'm telling you, it is just tearing up this country. I think, like you said, we need prayer. We need a mighty revival. We need a reformation and a change of heart. In the name of Jesus.
We certainly do. Appreciate your comment. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. And again, I would encourage you to get some more information and maybe pass that on to others. We have a take action item on that. And of course, some of you, like we just talked about a minute ago, Paul, have seen some of the videos. Some of you might say, well, I hear about it, but they don't really cover it in the mainstream media. Yep, I know that. So we do have an opportunity for you to watch some of the videos on Point of View, and then of course you can follow the link and watch some of the others. And as Marjorie Dannenfelser said just a minute ago, I'm glad she said that, because I was thinking the same thing. These most recent videos are really disturbing, because here they're talking about all sorts of things like, oh, well, we can provide that. We just kind of bake that into our contract. They talk about, well, we can change some of the line item. I love what Tony Perkins said, life is not a line item. And I will give high credit to some of our Democrats who are pro-life. Let me just pick out one here. Senator Joe Manchin, I mentioned his name before. He's a Democrat from West Virginia. He told reporters, quote, like many West Virginians, I am very troubled by the callous behavior of Planned Parenthood staff in recently released videos. Until these allegations have been answered and resolved, I do not believe that taxpayer money should be used to fund this organization. He will take a hit, by the way. No doubt there will be Democrats that will be very upset with him. So I would at least say to my listeners in the West Virginia area, you might say, thank you for taking a stand, not only for life, but taking a stand that might actually hurt your relationships with the Democratic Party. And to be fair, let's also mention those of you listening in Indiana, because Joe Donnelly, also a Democrat, also voted to end the filibuster to actually implement cloture. So those are a few individuals on the Democratic side that deserve a pat on the back. Of course, all the Republicans except for Senator Kirk from Illinois all voted to do so. So the Republicans were pretty good. The Democrats were really bad except for those two exceptions. And we will take a break and come back and get into a couple of other issues that we certainly can cover. Let me kind of give you a preview of what's going to happen. Tomorrow we're going to spend a little bit of time dealing with a couple of key issues. We'll have Timothy Daly in studio with us talking about his book. and we'll have Brian Walsh with us by phone, and then we're going to be looking ahead to the presidential debates that will take place. There will be two. There will be one in the afternoon and one in the evening. And then on Friday, we have, I think, we already got Alan West in studio. I know that. I know we have Gary Bauer by phone. I know that Debbie Georgiadis is up there. We might even connect up again with Marjorie Dannenfelser. Just a number of people to kind of give us some analysis on Friday of what you have had a chance to watch on Thursday. So we do encourage you to watch the debates. And if not, we'll try to play a few audio clips here to let you know what happened. But then we're going to hear from some of our experts to give us some perspective on what we had a chance to hear. So we've got lots coming up, but let's take one of those mandatory breaks. And when we come back, we'll take some more of your phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. 1-800-351-1212. We'll take some of those calls right after these important messages.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
A couple more minutes if you would like to join our conversation. 1-800-351-1212. Let's go out to Alaska, KJNP. And Marilyn, thank you for calling today. You're on the air. Maybe we need to put Marilyn on hold for just a minute, and we'll come back to her. And let's go to Scott in Missouri. Scott, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Kirby. Thanks for taking the call. I've listened to the calls about abortion. I listened to the more recent interview you had with Mr. Ireland. And it reminded me of a verse two verses in Micah chapter 6, verses 7 and 8. And this struck me a year or two ago when I was reading the Bible. And I'll read the verses and then explain what I mean.
Sure.
It's Micah 6, 7 and 8. Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams or 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I offer my first? In other words, will he be pleased with all of these sacrifices? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? And it struck me as that this whole abortion thing is basically, obviously, a result of us moving away from God and trying to offer all kinds of excuses and reasons why we think we are with God. We're still with Him because we've got all these so-called sacrifices of rams and 10,000 rivers of oil. But then in verse 8, he says, He has shown you, O man, what is good. In other words, this is what God wants from you. It's what He requires, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with Him. And how do you walk with Him? That daily prayer, that daily communication with Him. And which I'm all for the active, being quite active in politics and that sort of thing and trying to change law. But I think as believers, our number one priority is that constant communication and walking humbly with Him. And then when those opportunities show up where we can change culture, we have the fortitude to do it just because we've been in contact with Him during that sort of preparation time. And I thought that verse kind of tied the two things together today a little bit. That you
I
were
would
talking.
agree. Yeah, as we say in seminary sometimes, that'll preach. That is outstanding. And a lot of people are familiar, of course, Micah 6:8, but you take the verse before and how appropriate that is in terms of our cultural context as well. And, I've had some people over the years, Scott, say, well, you're just a political show. And I said, well, no, we do whole shows on things like evangelism and apologetics. And we've done quite a few on prayer this last year because of our emphasis on praying for America. But nevertheless, people kind of pigeonhole you in one category or the other. But I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and. I think you've done a very good job of tying those two together.
I agree with you on that, and I appreciate you taking the call.
Well, appreciate you calling in. You added quite a bit. Matter of fact, I'm thinking maybe there's a sermon out of all of that I could maybe use in the future. So I do appreciate that idea. Let's go back and see if we can catch, do we have Marilyn now? I'm trying to see if we got there. Do we got Marilyn? Are you there?
I am.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, I just wanted to call and say that I do believe in prayer, and I think that God answers prayer. The Bible says that He does. And so my idea would be that churches now, at least a lot of churches, don't have Sunday services in the evening. And I thought if the churches across the nation would open their doors and just encourage their people to come and pray for our country, maybe 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. And that was my idea, just a thought.
Sure. Well, we have a prayer chapel at my church, and people can go in there at different times and pray. And, in the past, lots of times the Catholic churches would be open for those prayer times for individuals to go. And oftentimes that was tied into, confession or something else. But still, I think there is a value in saying, we need to be praying for this nation, and it shouldn't just be a national day of prayer, as much as I really support, and we have always supported the National Day of Prayer, but we need to be praying every single day. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have David Ireland on here, because sometimes we pray, that God would bless these individuals, and I'm saying, well, not always. I mean, I don't think that I should pray that God would bless all the things that this president has done right now. I certainly don't think we should pray that God would bless everything that Planned Parenthood is doing all right now, or pray that the country of Iran, something we'll probably talk about on Friday in light of the presidential debates, prosper. I mean, sometimes prayer is a very definite weapon, not just against Satan, but against the principalities as well as those who battle against us. So I think that's an important issue as well. So I appreciate your phone call today.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It was great to hear from you up there in Alaska. We are processing a few more phone calls. I'll get those in just a minute. But while we do so, let me mention that if you just happen to join us, we did in the first hour today talk with Marjorie Dannenfelser, and she was helping us understand a little bit more about kind of the battle for pro-life issues. And we did really want to encourage you, if you have not contacted your 2 United States senators about how they voted on this issue of defunding Planned Parenthood. Number one, you can find out how they voted in case you did not know by going to the Take Action item. But then number two, we really do encourage you to contact them and tell them that you agree with that decision or disagree with that decision. And I think that would be very helpful. I think we now probably are passing about 1,000 people who have gone through the website to contact their senators. And as good as that is, let's recognize we have a lot more listeners than that, a whole lot more listeners than that. And so there's still an opportunity for you to let your elected representatives know how you feel on that issue. And as I've said before, sometimes if they do not see the light, they will sometimes feel the heat. And certainly if all sorts of people, if hundreds and maybe even thousands of people contact a senator's office, they're going to pay attention. Let's go back to the phones. In Georgia, Carolyn, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, I was listening to your program and you were talking about abortions and things of that nature. And I'm just thinking that people ought to reconsider that being pregnant is a gift of God. And if they are shunning the gift, they'll definitely go, if there's no forgiveness there, they're going to be punished beyond measure, and they should consider that. But if they don't want to get pregnant, they should stay out of the bedroom.
Yeah, I see another caller who wants to talk about dealing with the problem, not the symptoms. So, we have talked about these old issues about premarital sex, cohabitation, talked about, sex education programs, school-based health clinics, on and on and on. There are just a lot of issues that are tied up into it. But certainly this issue of abortion is one, and of course the selling of baby parts has been one that I think has pricked the conscience of Americans. And so that's why we will continue to talk about it from time to time, if for no other reason than the fact is we have organizations that have really been able to pull back the veneer. Of course, the Center for Medical Services is one right now in the news, but remember Lila Rose and Live Action have done that in the past. And we've learned a lot more about kind of the dark underbelly of Planned Parenthood. Apologize I didn't get to all the phone calls. I got to most of them. I think that's pretty good. And of course, there's always tomorrow. And most importantly, you really do not want to miss Friday. We're kind of trying to put together a cast of individuals who can give us some evaluation of what they had a chance to see on the presidential debates on Thursday. And as we talked about with Marjorie Dannenfelser, this is really important to really pay attention who you elect as president, who you elect as your senators, your representative, and of course even pay attention to what's happening in these state legislatures right now, because a lot of pro-life victories are being won right there at the state level. So again, there's just a lot of reason for you to not only pray for America, but also make sure that you vote appropriately and intelligently for the leadership that will guide this country in the future. That's all we have for today. So let me encourage you to visit the website, pointofview.net. Have information about our tour next year of Israel and Greece. You can find that, the Take Action item, and much, much more. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris and Abby for their help behind the scenes. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
From Thinking Man Films, Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus on DVD. Earlier this year, thousands gathered in theaters nationwide for a one-night event, the release of a new documentary, Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus. The Exodus presents new scientific evidence clearly matching the biblical account. A documentary now available on DVD, featuring narration by actor Kevin Sorbo and interviews with leading archaeologists. Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, the DVD, soundtrack, and book, and available online for digital download. More information at patternsofevidence.com. And never give up on defending life. Urge your elected representatives to defund Planned Parenthood. Please, the recent revelations have the political fire on high. Visit pointofview.net and click on the Take Action link to defund Planned Parenthood. We should not have to participate in this grisly evil. Come on, we make it easy for you to speak up with just a few clicks. Pointofview.net, take action. Pointofview.net, take action. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.